I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a police chief fired after a year on the job. The technical detail that may have led to a leadership shakeup inside the Calexico Police Department.
On this World AIDS Day, a closer look at the communities affected most by HIV and the San Diego doctors who are raising questions about the role of race in healthcare. Plus, protecting the world's oceans, the San Diego researchers who want that at the top of the agenda during the Paris climate talks.
What is a chore, Hector V?
My mom told me to mow the front lawn. That's a chore.
Examining the top of the class, a San Diego charter school beats expectations on standardized tests. The strategy was inspired by the district's past. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. San Diego County is having a tougher time meeting state water conservation goals. 9 water districts in the region missed their targets for the month of October. That is the worst that San Diego County has done since the governor ordered conservation in April. Overall, Californians lowered their water use by only about 22% compared to October of 2013. That's below Governor Jerry Brown's order of 25% conservation.
We only have 7 that are more than 15% off the mark. So that's where we're focusing our efforts. We've issued fines to 4 of them. The city of Beverly Hills has been fined, as well as 3 other Southern California agencies, which are the Coachella Valley Water District, Indio, the city of Indio, and the city of Redlands.
Officials say Californians just have to keep finding new ways to save water. The Water Resources Board will hold a public workshop the next Monday to talk about how water conservation regulations will move forward. Following up on the communications fallout connected to the San Onofre nuclear plant shutdown, Superior Court Judge Ernest Goldsmith says the state PUC should release emails about the deal close to the site. The emails may reveal more about what could be Governor Jerry Brown's role in the shutdown. The agreement requires electricity customers to pay the bulk of the nearly $5 billion cost to close the plant. The Calexico Police Department's chief is being fired after more than a year of turmoil and investigations in that department. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has the story.
Michael Bostic was hired in October 2014 and quickly found himself at odds with the police union. He says they acted like the mob, and he fired 7 officers over the course of a year. He also asked the U.S. Department of Justice to audit the force. Today, Calexico's acting city manager, Nick Fenley, issued a press release explaining why he chose to remove Bostic effective Saturday. He says it's because Bostic acquired the title of police chief without approval from the city council. Bostic is on administrative leave until Saturday. City Councilwoman Maritza Hurtado says Fenley chose to fire Bostic without consulting with the full city council.
We fired a man for doing his job, and that is just unbelievable.
Hurtado says some members of the city council had close relationships with the officers Bostic fired. Neither Bostic nor Fenley responded to requests for comment. The city's insurance coverage was canceled last month in response to political turmoil and the high rate of turnover from management positions. The Justice Department investigation is continuing, and the FBI has also been investigating the Calexico Police Department since last fall. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
San Diego County property owners will pay $295 million more in property taxes this year. The total value of all property in San Diego County topped $5.3 billion. Value has climbed steadily since home values crashed in 2008. The county's tax revenue can go up for a couple of reasons. Home values have been bouncing back since the recession, and there's new construction in places like downtown San Diego. More than 985,000 tax bills were sent out in September. Only 27% of them have been paid so far, and the deadline is December 10th. Dan McAllister is the San Diego County Treasurer and Tax Collector. He says nearly $2 billion will have to be paid in just over a week. McAllister says payments can be made in person or payments can be paid online.
Last year, over 51% of all payments were made electronically to the County of San Diego for taxes. And we're hopeful of driving that number even higher this year.
McAllister says the single largest chunk of tax money collected by the county goes to schools. Supporters and opponents of a major development on a Carlsbad lagoon are drawing battle lines. From the KPBS North County Bureau, reporter Allison St. John says the ballot arguments are being finalized for Measure A.
Wednesday is the deadline for ballot arguments to be signed and sealed, ready for the counter-arguments to be written. How the issue is framed is important because Carlsbad's special election is only 12 weeks away, so many voters will be focused on the holidays rather than on learning the pros and cons of Measure A. But Measure A has split the community. Some want to see an upscale outdoor shopping and dining center like the Grove in LA, next to Interstate 5 and overlooking the Agua Hedionda Lagoon. But opponents say the city and the developer are being disingenuous by presenting the project as a way to preserve the strawberry fields while giving the developer total control of the retail development for the next 15 years. The developer, Caruso Affiliated, has already spent more than $5 million on promoting the plan. Opponents have spent a few thousand to collect the signatures for this election, which will be on February 23rd. From the KPBS North County Bureau, Allison St. John, KPBS News.
A California delegation will join world leaders for this week's United Nations Summit on Climate Change. Governor Jerry Brown arrives in Paris on Friday this year. He called for ambitious climate change goals for California, including working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to below 1990 levels by the year 2050. He says California can't sustain its aggressive push to fight climate change without similar efforts from other states and countries.
What I hope to accomplish in Paris is to take the California model, what we've done in supporting zero-emission vehicles, in introducing now 25% of our electricity from renewable sources, the cap-and-trade system, the energy efficiency standards, all of that has put California in the forefront of climate leadership. But we don't want to be the outlier. We'd like to be the norm.
San Diego researchers are also in Paris calling on world leaders to help protect the world's oceans. Amitha Sharma has more on why these bodies of water are vital to the global ecosystem.
The world's oceans are not faring well under climate change, and yet international climate talks rarely put the state of the oceans up high on the agenda. A team of researchers from Scripps Institution of Oceanography hopes to change that as global warming negotiations get underway in Paris this week. Scripps graduate student Yassir Edibar goes to Paris tomorrow. He joins me now. How vital are oceans to the global ecosystem?
First off, thank you for having me. And I'm very excited to attend the next Conference of the Parties. The oceans are extremely important, not only to our climate, but to our health and our global ecosystems. They provide protein to about 2 billion of people worldwide. They're hugely important to our climate. They essentially modulate our climate. And for climate change, they play a central role. About a quarter of carbon emissions that we emit every year end up in the ocean. And about 90% of the heat that's trapped by those greenhouse gases is absorbed by the ocean. So without the ocean, I think climate change would have a very different scenario.
So with that absorption, what's been the ultimate effect on the water?
So these services, of course, they don't come free of charge. They come at a high price. The absorption of heat warms up waters worldwide, and so that has an impact, for example, on coral bleaching, on reducing the habitat of marine ecosystems. The uptake of carbon, for example, makes the water more acidic. It makes the pH go down and acidity increases. And that makes it hard for calcifying organisms like coral reefs and shells to grow. And that has wide impacts on fisheries and ocean-dependent countries. And
in turn, then, what effect are warming seas and acidification having on climate change?
So at the same time, the impact of, for example, ocean heat uptake has a tremendous influence on our climate. Because of the ability of the ocean to take heat, we're seeing climate change that is not as serious as it could be. For example, without the ocean, climate change would have reached about 36 degrees Celsius warmer. But because the ocean can absorb that heat, it's essentially buffering climate change to a large degree. And climate negotiations usually are sort of landlocked or land biased in the policy discourse.
So yeah, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. So despite the effect and this relationship, oceans are not front and center in global warming talks. Why?
There are a variety of reasons why that happens. One of them is that the ocean crosses boundaries worldwide, so it's not within the boundary of every specific country. A lot of these ocean topics can be vague to delegates. They don't have direct relevance to their constituents. And there are no delegates for marine organisms at these tables. And that's where I think the role of ocean scientists, non-governmental organizations, and collaborations like the Ocean and Climate Platform that Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego is taken part of.
Right, and so you're part of this team at Scripps Institution of Oceanography that's traveling to the Paris conference, I believe, tomorrow. What will you do there?
So as part of the Scripps delegation and the UC San Diego delegation, our role is to inform the policy process through our work research in ocean sciences and climate sciences. This year, the focus is on raising awareness on the ocean's role in climate, and some of our members, for example, distinguished Professor Ram Ramanathan, will be providing scientific advice to the Holy See. These are delegates from the Vatican. As well as participating in panel events. And I think the most important part of these delegations attending the COP is informal conversations in hallways that bring a lot of these ocean topics to policymakers in an accessible manner rather than having to sort through IPCC reports that are pretty dense. And so I look forward to actually participating and talking to delegates from around the world, along with my colleagues and faculty members.
And very quickly now, what is needed to protect the world's oceans?
First of all, we need to put it right into the center of the climate policy discussions. When we, for example, design climate mitigation and adaptation strategies, we have to make sure we have ocean impacts as part of the discussion. We also need to observe the changes in the oceans because a lot of it occurs in the subsurface of the ocean, and we don't really know a lot about the ocean. So I think all of this would be a tremendous benefit, I think.
Thank you, Yasser Edibar.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
There are new signs that California schools need funding for repairs. UC Berkeley researchers found that more than half of school districts haven't spent enough money to keep facilities repaired. That's especially true in poorer districts. A state bond program that helps fund repairs ran out in 2012. The Berkeley report also found that money went disproportionately to wealthier school districts. A San Diego charter school had great standardized test scores last year, even though a majority of the students come from underprivileged homes. KPBS reporter Megan Burks looked into what's making the school tick. She found a blast from the San Diego Unified School District's contentious past.
So you're going to be entertaining someone.
America's finest charter school teacher Cassandra Tinio is preparing her students to write a personal narrative.
To entertain and to talk about an event that happened in your own life. That is what personal narrative means.
They're settled in on the floor around her to hear one read from a book. But first, a review of what to listen for and later replicate.
Action explains what happened using descriptive words like what. Verbs. Okay, action words.
Tinio's students last year scored the highest on state tests for reading and writing among low-income third graders statewide.
But what is a chore, Hector V?
My mom told me to mow the front lawn. That's a chore.
With about 80% passing, they beat San Diego Unified's 48% pass rate and even outperformed their more well-off peers in the district, who had a 69% pass rate. Other classes in the Choice View Charter School also impressed, especially given nearly half are English language learners.
These kids were not so high when they started. Like, this is red. That means they're far below basic. And this means they became proficient at at the end of the year.
School director Jan Perry points to a spreadsheet detailing student progress over the year. A daunting block of red scores morphs into blues and greens, indicating proficiency. How does the school do it? Her answer is surprising.
Alan Burson.
That's right, Alan Burson, the superintendent who inspired so much vitriol. A board trustee and protesting teachers likened him to a Nazi.
So this is kindergarten.
Perry was a peer coach for teachers and earned her administrative credential during Burson's tenure from 1998 to 2005. What many saw as totalitarian-style orders, Perry considered ingenious reform.
Wait for me, please. But what struck me was that the principal was the instructional leader, and the principal was in classrooms, visiting classrooms, and really setting the stage for student learning.
Taken by some as an intrusion, Burson's so-called blueprint for student success put coaches and principals in classrooms to help teachers improve their instruction. Burson threw all of his resources at improving reading and math scores. He extended English classes, he added special tutoring hours, and he got special permission from the feds to use Title I funds for low-income kids to make it happen across the district. The district began to see gains in its earlier grade levels. Then in 2005, the school board voted to oust Burson.
But then I noticed as the years went on, as new superintendents came in, they had their own agendas. And I was determined that I really felt this was so important for kids to do balanced literacy and to do math for understanding that I was determined to open up a charter school.
What did you do to make your writing fun and interesting to read? Tell what you did. If you did it, you're going to put a check mark.
You can spot Burson's legacy at America's finest charter school in Kim Brunetto's 5th grade classroom.
And if I've asked you to read, I would like you to bring your writing.
Reading, writing, and math take up most of the day.
The title of my book is called My Best Friend Destiny.
Visits from Perry or the on-campus reading coach or observing colleagues are common.
She tells me not to worry, and she always makes me happy.
That's because Perry's biggest takeaway from the Burson years was the importance of consistent professional development.
I've had more training here at this school than I ever had before.
Pay attention to what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Brunetto's students last year had a 63% pass rate on the math standardized test.
We had feather beds. The mattresses were stuffed with chicken feathers.
Back in Cassandra Tinio's class, it's hard not to believe her students' high scores were more circumstantial than Burson.
You can have your eyes closed to help you visualize and paint the picture.
Tinio taught them for multiple years.
I did have my kids from kinder, and then I jumped to first with them. And then when I taught them in 3rd grade, it was really like a family. We are our own little family. It's, oh, Miss Tinio, hi, remember in 1st grade, remember in kindergarten?
But Heather Latimer says it's reasonable to believe Burson is influencing the district today. She's Associate Dean at University of San Diego's School of Leadership and Education Sciences, and she helps run a school leadership program that got its start with Burson's help.
In many ways, you see a rebirth, I guess, of some of the ideas and principles that were there at the time that Alan was in the superintendency role. I would say that the other piece of that is that you see a lot of the same people. So a lot of the people who are in leadership roles now are people who were part of that first group of peer coaches.
The blueprint makes sense.
Catherine Nakamura was a school board trustee during Burson's last year as superintendent.
So we need to reach out to those teachers, we need to reach out to those parents because they need to see themselves in the blueprint for success.
And fondly refers to her own children as blueprint babies. They were students in the Burson era. Nakamura says Burson's efforts better be making their way back into classrooms.
I hope so. I mean, we spent millions and millions of dollars on professional development in the school district.
Alan Burson is now an assistant secretary in the Department of Homeland Security. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Katie Shuloff helped produce that story. The theme of this year's World AIDS Day is the time to act is now. Today, many countries raising awareness of HIV and AIDS, and people are mourning those lost to the disease. President Barack Obama says his administration will continue working to reduce new HIV infections, and the administration will work to make medicine more accessible.
Together, through better education and life-saving treatments, we're committed to reducing new HIV infections and supporting people living with HIV across the globe.
The World Health Organization says the number of HIV infections is down, but the illness continues to claim hundreds of thousands of lives worldwide each year. The AIDS Memorial Quilt led today's events at UC San Diego. 3 panels serve as both backdrop and impetus for education about the virus. Campus LGBT leaders say the quilt helps to educate people about HIV and AIDS.
There needs to be less and less stigma related to being HIV positive and more support for those that are diagnosed and providing access to those medications which extend their life.
The quilt has been coming to the La Jolla campus for more than a decade. On this World's AIDS Day, San Diego doctors are taking a closer look at the connection between race and healthcare. Amitha Sharma has more on the communities affected most by HIV infections.
On this World AIDS Day today, we're taking a look at race and healthcare. New HIV infections in African Americans is 8 times that of whites based on population size. A public forum in San Diego today will focus on racial disparities in healthcare. 2 of the panelists at that forum are here with me. They are Dr. Kamara Jones, president of the American Public Health Association, and Dr. Rodney Hood, president of the San Diego-based Multicultural Health Foundation. Thanks both of you for joining us here. Let me start with you. How are people of color treated differently by the healthcare system? Is it a matter of actual care, access to care, or both?
Well, actually, those 2 and a 3rd factor, which are the conditions of our lives. So in 2002, the Institute of Medicine released its unequal treatment report, which showed differences by race or ethnicity in the quality of care that people would get, depending, even if they're all in the same system, everybody in the VA or everybody covered by Medicare or Medi-Cal. So that's quality. But then they said, of course, we have very well recognized differences in access to care. But the most important thing happens outside of the healthcare system, and that's in the conditions of our lives. So the kinds of neighborhoods that we live in, whether or not we have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, whether or not our sons are targeted by police or not, whether or not the schools are there and available. And so these conditions of our lives is really the huge hidden part of the iceberg that is causing the differences in health experience, because health is not created within the health sector. It happens in housing, education, agriculture, all across the board.
And Dr. Hood, based on what Dr. Jones just described, what is the actual effect on people?
The actual effect on people that are forced to live under these conditions is a shorter lifespan, is poor quality of life.
So give me an example. There's a statistic based on people born in southeastern San Diego and La Jolla. Tell me about that.
Well, data now suggests that your life expectancy is more determinative of where you live and who you are, rather than your genetics. So if you look at a baby born in southeast San Diego, the life expectancy is 77 years. If you look at a baby born at the same time in La Jolla, it's 85 years. If you look within those structures and look at it by race, the group with the lowest life expectancy are African Americans, around 75. The group with the highest are Asians and Hispanics. And the issue is why do we have those differences?
So why? Why do we have these differences?
So I would say it's the way that opportunity is structured in this country and the way that value is assigned in this country. When we had an initiative that was announced back in 1998 to eliminate racial and ethnic health disparities by the year 2010. That was part of our Healthy People 2010 plan. At least that was an advance. Black infant mortality compared to white infant mortality, we used to try to do this. And we said, well, we're going to eliminate those disparities. But after all of the effort and all of the resources, we haven't been fully successful, and that's because we're still pruning this weed at the edges as opposed to getting to the root. And when you think about root causes of racial ethnic health disparities, racism is the predominant root cause of those disparities, because what we measure as race is not biology, but it's the social classification of people in a race-conscious society.
So, Dr. Jones, how aware are doctors, the whole healthcare system, of this disparate treatment?
Probably not to the level where they should be. And clearly this has been discussed for 20 or 30 years. And so more and more physicians are becoming aware, but not to the level where they should be. The issue really isn't just with physicians, but I think our community as a whole, in that until the community gets engaged and realizes that this is an issue. I'm president of the Multicultural Health Foundation. We use that as inclusive rather than exclusive. What I mean by that is we just want you to be part of the human family and have culture to be involved. So what we're talking about just isn't about blacks, just isn't about Hispanics or Asians. It's about all of American. I've done my DNA. My DNA shows that I have a certain percentage of European, African, Asian, and Native American. I am internally, genetically very diverse. I love me, okay? So the issue isn't diversity, it's about justice and equity. And if we look at the data, it continually shows that people of color many times are treated differently within this society. The good thing is that as we recognize it, it can change.
And Dr. Hood, Dr. Jones, thanks for coming on the program. There are more details on today's forum on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Let's call this one suiting up for a new look at the ballpark. The San Diego Padres unveiled a new navy blue camouflage uni today. Now, those uniforms are modeled after the U.S. Navy. The new uniforms will only be worn on Sunday home games starting next season. Layer up. We are expecting more frosty nights, probably not a snowman, but frosty nights in San Diego, along with warmer days in the forecast. 70s and 60s by the beaches. More of the same in the inland valleys, with temperatures there in the 70s and 60s. It will be cooler in the mountains, highs in the 50s and 60s, and if you're going out into the deserts, very comfortable 70s out there. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here again tomorrow night. Have a great evening.